Okay, y'all, this is like the fourth time I've started this and I keep messing it up, so let me see if I can talk right now. Um, I want to talk about edges for a few minutes just because somebody online had posted talking about how when they try and turn an edge on, I think it's a relatively new napper, but when they try and turn an edge, they get all kinds of little micro steps, little boogered up underneath the edge. And that I think is fairly common. Um, Again, micro steps are still steps. Micro hinges are hinges, and they occur for the same reasons that big ones do, potentially. And it's not that hard to understand why they occur and stop them from occurring so that you don't get that. Basically, when you take a series of flakes on edge, let me take a series of flakes. I'm just going to take short flakes. I'm going to use this bopper and I'm going to use the side of it instead of the rounded end of it. But I'm going to try and take them at an angle. This is an unprepared. Let me prepare an edge like I was going to actually work it. Okay, so we're pretending that this is a great prepared edge and we're going to take a series of flakes like we normally would. So I'm going to hit at an angle that the flakes will go in pretty much. Okay, so I took a series of flakes. All right, the flakes didn't run deep in, but they ran in a little bit. So what you end up with now is you end up with an edge. I don't have great lighting for this either. You end up with an edge that has a bunch of concavities in it, a bunch of very thinness to it where each of the flakes was taken from the previous flakes. And nothing about this edge is good for taking another series of flakes. And one of the things you can end up with it also is you can end up with it too high up close to the center line, and that isn't good either. It isn't good for coming back to this side. It usually doesn't end up way above the center line, so it isn't good for going to that side either. So what do? Well, you got to turn the edge. The question is, how much do you want to turn it? It depends on where you are in the reduction process. If you're near the end of your flaking and you've got the edge standing up pretty straight and thin, you don't have to turn it much at all for the next series, even if you're going to do some pretty good flakes. So anyway, you're like, okay, so how do I get those flakes to come off clean? Well, this whole edge is wrong for getting flakes to come off clean with normal hits or normal flaking. So if you try and go in just like I did with the first series, almost everything you hit's going to try and fail on you, and it fails early, and so it starts hinging down and kicks up and makes little flakes. So how do you avoid that? Well, the first thing you can do is you can put it on good. If it's thin, you can put it on good support and just hit straight down and catch it. And if it's on good leather support, then the little flakes can't hinge down and kick up, and it'll be fairly clean. Or you can simply, which is what I would do sometimes, you can simply hold it in the air and turn it down a little bit and just barely catch it hitting straight downward. And because of the angle there, everything comes off pretty clean. You can see there are not a bunch of micro hinges on that at all. It's pretty clean. If you want to make sure it's even cleaner, instead of using copper, which is somewhat grabby, you can go with a very smooth hard stone, like a smooth quartzite type rock. This is fairly smooth. This is small. I'll do it with the side of the quartzite. Turn it down, taking the side of this quartzite, and just kind of hit it like that. And again, you get a pretty clean edge. Once you do that a time or two with series, what you end up with is you end up with the edge rolled upward, which means for hitting flakes this direction, it's almost overly strong. And then, but when you flip it, it's, in this case, because the concavity's here, it's rolled this way. So you got like a wire edge from this side and it's weak. So if you hit to that side, it's really weak and it's gonna fail and you're likely to get hinges. So then you can bring it back down a little bit with a bopper or whatever and abrade it. But what a lot of experienced nappers use is what's called a shearing tool. And I basically use several different ones depending upon what I'm trying to do. And I don't necessarily have the best one. I don't actually know what I did with my big one. I've got a big one of these somewhere. You just take a piece of copper tubing and hammer it out perfectly flat, and then you can put a concavity on the end, a convexity on the end, or however you want it, and get it fairly sharp and like that, and use that. It's called a shearing tool. So the way you use that is, it depends on what you want to do. Again, you can do it at different angles. You could shear it at this kind of angle. You can shear inward at the angle. Like if you're close to finishing and you got a thin edge and you want to keep the edge thin, then if you shear this inward angle, the flakes will run in flatter and it'll be sharper, but you have more risk of hinging it. If you shear at an outward angle, you don't have on support, you don't have much risk of hinging things at all. So you can see it's taking a lot of flakes, and you can control it and have a fairly straight cut however you want it. And see if I can get this where I can show you. It's very clean. There really aren't any hinges to speak of on that edge. So that's shearing. A less grabby thing than copper to shear with, in this case, this is actually a piece of a diamond saw blade, so it's steel with little diamonds centered into it, but it's steel. And again, it shears pretty cleanly. And then last but not least, this is bison rib. And this is all almost pretty sheared, but you can take and shear with it too. And it comes off pretty cleanly. So those are ways to turn an edge a slight amount with shearing. The thing to just remember is that if for whatever reason you want to raise an edge a lot or lose a bunch of width, you're better off going ahead and doing it with a bopper or something where you can do some good. But if you notice, I'm coming down on top of it, and you say, well, aren't you going to snap your piece? Not if you know what you're doing. And by coming down on top of it, it's fairly clean. But now this is rolled, so I got to come back the other way. And as you can see, that's pretty darn clean. And now it's back more to a normal shape. Although it's got a steeper bevel up here because I wasn't hitting inward, I was hitting straight down. So if you don't want that steep a bevel, then you gotta do it a different way. Oh, one other thing I was gonna show you. I sometimes do what I call like percussion shearing. I'll take a coarse abrader, and instead of grinding on the piece with it, I kind of come in glancing bows like I was doing with the quartzite, like doing that. But I do that with this, and it's got all these little grabby areas on it, and it catches the edge. And you can straighten and shape the edge and everything and take flakes. And the advantage to it versus abrading is as long as I'm hitting it with the thing and coming off it quickly and not cross grinding, I'm not actually thickening and strengthening the edge as much as I would be if I was abrading it. Because you can easily get your edge overly strong if you over abrade. Which I know everybody probably thinks I over abrade, but I don't abrade normally too much for me to to fight it to a draw. I don't know why, but I just want to hit it. I think I'm going to hit it. I didn't have the edge right, but oh well. I think this has probably been a pretty lousy discussion, but I suppose you could take a biface and shear another biface with it. Probably if you did it right, you could get two bifaces and shear both of them at the same time with each other. Okay, that's probably enough for today. Bye for now. Freeze cracked.